The R-Vee world just got hit with a shock nobody was prepared for. Korea officially unveiled its new 2026 R-Vee, and the moment those numbers went public, everything changed. Dealers froze, analysts scrambled, manufacturers panicked, because this rig didn't just enter the market, it blew a hole straight through the pricing structure everyone depended on. We're talking a level of build quality the competition can't match, paired with a price point that should be impossible. And somehow, Korea pulled it off anyway. Now the entire industry is trying to figure out how to respond. And buyers are suddenly in the strongest position they've had in years. And trust me, the fallout you're about to see is only the beginning. The reveal that caught the market asleep. The first public sighting of the Kiva Mobile RCK8 did not look like a normal product launch. It looked like a warning shot. When the cover came off and the 2026 model stood on the floor under bright show lights, the reaction was not applause, it was disbelief. This was not a prototype. This was a fully built, export-ready R-Vee, sitting at a figure no domestic builder expected to see this decade. Analysts crowded around the placard, trying to confirm the number written in bold print. And once they realized it was not a misprint, the conversation shifted instantly. If that figure held, every Class C in North America was suddenly overpriced. One trade reporter uploaded a close-up photo of the sticker within minutes, and the screenshot hit several dealer groups before the show even opened to the public. Comments came fast. Some asked whether the Korean team had made a mistake. Others said the entire floor plan system would buckle if the model shipped at that number. More than a few said this was the first time a foreign-built R-Vee posed a genuine threat to the domestic lineup. The reveal was loud, but the shock was louder. The next question became how Korea managed to hit that figure at all. The Korean cost structure Western brands cannot match. The RCK8's pricing did not come from luck. It came from a cost structure Western builders cannot touch. Korean assembly plants operate with automation rates approaching 70%, according to a recent Seoul manufacturing report, meaning far fewer labor hours per unit. That alone shifts the economics, but the next factor goes deeper. Most components used in the 2026 RCK8 come from a tight radius of suppliers, eliminating long-haul freight charges and vendor markups that hit US and European lines hard. When you produce cabinetry, wiring bundles, and interior hardware within a few kilometers of the final assembly line, the savings become structural. A supplier invoice comparison circulated in an industry forum showed Korean electrical modules priced hundreds of dollars lower per batch than similar Western parts. Multiplied across a full build cycle, the gap reaches several thousand before the rig even touches a chassis. Then comes the efficiency of integrated tooling. Korean factories can shift between production stages without waiting days for subcontracted components to arrive. This is how a Korean-built R-Vee enters the market tens of thousands below domestic figures without cutting corners. It is math, not magic. This gap sets off a chain reaction dealers cannot hide. The first signs of that chain reaction appeared within hours. If you're finding value in this breakdown, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you stay ahead of the next round of price shifts. The market is moving faster than most people realize, and the updates coming next will matter even more. Dealer panic. Within the first 72 hours of the RCK8's price leak, dealer networks slipped into quiet panic. Floor plan managers started recalculating depreciation curves, knowing that if a lower-cost rival hit the market, the rigs sitting on their lots would lose value before they could clear them. A leaked internal bulletin from a Midwest dealer group warned sales teams to prepare for accelerated adjustments, a phrase rarely used outside year-end blowout periods. In plain terms, it meant discounting was coming whether they liked it or not. One store in Arizona slashed a Class C from $133,000 down to $119,000 over a weekend. They did not advertise it as a sale. They simply needed to prevent the unit from becoming stale inventory before Korean shipments arrived. Several pre-orders were canceled as well. Once shoppers saw the RCK8's estimated figure online, they asked for refunds and chose to wait. Deposits were returned quietly, but the message was clear. Confidence was slipping. Behind the scenes, managers began calling manufacturers for reassurance. None received firm answers. Everyone knew what a lower-priced competitor meant. The cancellations were only the beginning. Then, the industry discovered a second Korean advantage no one predicted: the shipping advantage no one calculated. Manufacturers believed long-distance freight would erase Korea's pricing edge. They were wrong. Updated container rate data from a Busan logistics report showed that shipping a finished R-Vee across the Pacific often costs less than moving a domestic rig across several states by truck. When a full container carries multiple units, the per-vehicle cost drops to a figure that undercuts domestic transport even after port fees. It shocked planners who assumed overseas delivery would neutralize the advantage. Meanwhile, U.S. builders still rely on long-haul trucking, escort vehicles, and high diesel costs to move rigs from factory lots to dealership parking spaces. Each step adds layers of expense. Korea avoids nearly all of that. Their production lines sit within minutes of major ports, and once units roll onto a ship, the economics shift in their favor. One import projection, reviewed by trade analysts, showed that even after customs processing and inland delivery, the landed cost of a Korean Class C remained below what domestic builders spend just to transport theirs regionally. That revelation turned concern into alarm. Shipping was supposed to be the equalizer. Instead, it widened the gap. Manufacturers realized they were already behind, and the deeper structural damage was only beginning to surface. The manufacturing efficiency gap. Korean factories building the RCK-8 operate on a production model that Western manufacturers stopped chasing years ago. Instead of relying on scattered subcontractors and manually intensive assembly lines, Korean facilities lean heavily on robotics for welding, panel bonding, and precision cutting. One manufacturing report from a Seoul Industrial Review listed automation rates above 70%, a figure far beyond what most North American builders reach. When more machines handle repetitive work, production hours fall sharply, and mistakes drop with them. That combination pushes per-unit labor costs down while improving consistency, something Western factories struggle to match. Vertical integration plays a major role as well. Many Korean plants source cabinetry, wiring harnesses, and subframe components from suppliers located within a few kilometers, reducing logistics delays and input markups. A report comparing regional manufacturing showed lead times shrinking by nearly a third in Korea, while U.S. manufacturers still wrestle with extended vendor queues. This efficiency gap matters because it changes how fast a factory can respond to demand shifts. Korean plants can scale output with far fewer bottlenecks, letting them maintain stable pricing even when orders surge. Western factories cannot pivot fast enough. Lower production cost is only one part of the pressure building upstream. Supply chain shock. Korean suppliers have reshaped the cost landscape by delivering critical components at figures Western vendors cannot match. A sourcing comparison published last quarter showed Korean electrical modules priced at roughly one-third less than similar units from major U.S. distributors. Plumbing assemblies, including PEX fittings and pump housings, landed at nearly half the domestic cost when purchased in bulk. Even chassis-related elements, such as mounting brackets and structural supports, came in with consistently lower quotes when traced through Korean supplier databases. This disparity shows up quickly in build sheets. When a manufacturer trims several $100s from individual systems, the savings stack rapidly. For a complete R-Vee, the total difference reaches into the thousands. Those numbers force Western builders to either absorb higher costs or raise retail pricing, neither of which works in a market suddenly seeing Korean competition. One cross-vendor price sheet circulating among industry insiders showed side-by-side component figures, and the Korean column repeatedly posted the lowest number. The gap was not marginal, it was systemic. Every cheaper part fed into a cheaper finished product. This puts pressure on the entire upstream economy. The next fault line appears where dealers make their money, the dealer margin breakdown. For decades, dealerships relied on a familiar margin model that kept profits stable even when inventory moved slowly. A typical domestic Class C might carry a markup of 15 to 20% above factory invoice, with additional room built in for financing plans and protection packages. That structure only works when competing rigs arrive with similar base costs. The RCK-8 disrupted that balance immediately. When a Korean-built R-Vee arrives, priced tens of thousands lower, the dealer's markup on domestic models stops looking justifiable. A real listing example showed a U.S. Class C posted at 129,000, right next to an early RCK8 preview, posted at just under 110,000. With that kind of spread, dealers cannot maintain traditional markups without losing sales. If they cut prices, their margins collapse. If they hold firm, inventory sits. Some managers already reported trimming packs and reducing add-on pricing to keep units moving, something rarely done voluntarily. With less breathing room on each sale, tension rises between dealers and manufacturers. The margin model begins to buckle. Dealerships start turning on manufacturers. As margins shrink, lenders step in with changes of their own. Finance companies rewriting R-Vee risk. Finance companies track risk closely, and the arrival of lower-priced Korean R-Vees forces them to reassess the entire category. When lenders see a new price floor forming, they adjust residual value forecasts, which affects loan terms immediately. A memo shared by a regional lending office noted that projected 3-year resale values for several domestic Class C models were revised downward after Korean pricing data entered the market. Lower projected resale equals higher perceived risk. Interest rates respond next. A rate sheet from last month showed certain R-Vee loans climbing by a 0.25 percentage point, a move designed to buffer lenders against potential losses. Meanwhile, approval requirements tightened slightly, with higher credit thresholds for extended term financing. These adjustments may seem small, but they change monthly payments in ways buyers feel immediately. The presence of the RCK8 is the catalyst. When a new model arrives at a lower figure, it compresses loan-to-value ratios across the board. Lenders are simply protecting themselves, but the result is tougher financing for anyone shopping now. Finance pain always hits the buyer last. With structural cracks widening, the global reaction begins to surface. U.S. manufacturers enter damage control mode. The moment U.S. manufacturers saw the RCK8's confirmed pricing, internal strategies shifted from confidence to containment. Several plants quietly trimmed production hours, with one Midwestern facility reducing its weekly build schedule from 5 days to 4 after a forecasting update projected slower Class C demand. A memo from that same facility referenced temporary line adjustments, which is the language often used before layoffs begin. Another builder paused a planned model refresh, not for engineering reasons, but because leadership wanted to avoid releasing a higher-priced unit into a falling market. Proof of this slowdown appeared in a supply chain document showing parts orders dropped by nearly 1/3 for an upcoming quarter. When factories cut orders, suppliers feel it first, and that ripple confirms genuine concern behind closed doors. These steps usually signal an attempt to protect cash positions before incentives grow too large. The next visible change came from accelerated discounting. A few manufacturers authorized what they called selective market relief, a phrase that masks the reality of early price cuts. Dealers received revised sticker guidance within days, which is rare outside of year-end clearance cycles. Not every brand survives this. Across the Atlantic, the pressure turns into something more complicated. Europe's double-bind, Korean pressure, meets EU rules. European R-Vee builders found themselves in a tougher position than anyone expected. They face Korean pricing on one side and increasingly strict EU regulations on the other. A compliance estimate from a Brussels policy review listed new emissions and safety requirements, adding roughly €3,000 to each vehicle produced after a specific regulatory threshold. These rules raise production expenses before the first screw is even turned, making it nearly impossible to match a lower-priced import. European manufacturers already operate in a high-cost environment, with labor rates, energy prices, and material expenses exceeding those in Korea. When the RCK8's numbers circulated, European analysts ran comparative cost models and confirmed the gap could not be closed without major subsidies or scaled-back features. Consumers also feel this pressure. Higher retail pricing pushes buyers toward imported units if agencies approve them for sale. One dealership in Germany posted internal guidance warning of sustained pricing strain once Korean shipments arrive, which means shoppers will face fewer discounts on domestic rigs and more incentives to consider overseas alternatives. The bind tightens as regulations continue to climb. Every new requirement increases costs. While Korea holds its advantage firmly, Europe becomes the weakest link In the southern hemisphere, the situation moves even faster. Before we move deeper into the fallout, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next part of this story. The numbers are already shifting again, and the upcoming data will shape how you time every decision from here. Australia and New Zealand bracing for import flooding. Australia and New Zealand rely heavily on imported R-Vees, which makes both markets especially vulnerable when a lower-priced, well-built Korean model enters the pipeline. Freight forwarding data from a Sydney shipping report showed import volume rising steadily over the past 5 years, with Korean shipments gaining traction even before the RCK8 gained attention. Average landed costs on imported rigs already trend lower than many domestic caravan builds, and Korean models push that gap wider. One pricing comparison from a regional distributor listed an incoming Korean Class C with a projected retail figure far below common Australian alternatives. That disparity puts local builders at a clear disadvantage. Many domestic caravan shops run on thin margins and rely on brand loyalty to survive. Once consumers see a competitively sourced Korean option, pressure builds quickly. Smaller manufacturers fear the worst. 2 regional builders issued letters to their dealer networks, hinting at market turbulence over the next quarter, a phrase that typically signals anticipated losses. When cheaper imports gain traction, local production lines struggle to maintain volume and profitability. Further downstream, travel patterns and local economies begin to shift. Tourism, campgrounds, and local economies shift. When more affordable, higher quality R-Vees enter multiple markets, travel behavior shifts in measurable ways. A tourism survey from last season recorded a rise in long-distance road travel linked to lower vehicle operating costs and improved reliability. Cheaper entry points mean more people take extended trips, putting new weight on campground infrastructure and local service industries. This shift may sound positive, but the economic impact is mixed. Campground operators benefit from increased occupancy, yet some face pressure to upgrade amenities to match the expectations brought in by newer rigs like the RCK8. A data point from a regional tourism board noted average campground improvements rising by nearly 10% after imported units increased in volume. Local businesses benefit from higher foot traffic, but maintenance demands and zoning considerations escalate at the same pace. Stronger destinations gain as travel grows, while older campgrounds fall behind. Shifting demand reshapes local pricing and long-term planning, and those changes eventually reshape resale markets, pushing depreciation curves in new directions. The final stage shows how these ripples hit individual wallets. Depreciation math after the RCK8. The arrival of the RCK8 sets a new price floor that older Class C units cannot defend. When a fully built Korean model lands well below the figures posted by comparable rigs, the used market reacts immediately. A recent listing study from a national marketplace showed average resale numbers slipping within weeks of the RCK8 preview, with some older models losing several thousand in asking price. This happens because depreciation accelerates when a new benchmark enters the market, flattening the value of rigs that once held steady. Consider a straightforward depreciation check. A Class C purchased 2 years ago at $125,000 might have held a resale figure near $110,000 under normal conditions. After the Korean pricing wave, projected resale drops closer to $102,000, shaving $8,000 off expected value without any mechanical change. That is how a new floor forces older units downward, even when they are maintained well. This shift is not emotional, it is math driven by market comparisons. As more Korean rigs enter the conversation, resale curves adjust further, and the numbers begin pulling down anything priced too close to the new baseline. This drop is not finished yet. The next piece of the puzzle is timing, and that window is already forming. Timing window, the next 90 days. The next set of price drops will not happen randomly. They follow a pattern built on supply flow, dealer inventory pressure, and shipping arrivals. A freight schedule from a West Coast logistics firm showed a cluster of Korean shipments expected to reach port within the next 90 days. When those containers unload, even in modest numbers, dealers holding higher-priced inventory begin to feel trapped. The result is predictable. Markdowns arrive first at locations with aging stock, then spread to regions where sales have slowed. Early signs already appear. One dealership inventory tracking file showed more units tagged as extended stay, meaning they have been sitting past their planned turnover timeline. When that number rises, managers look for any opportunity to clear space before freight from overseas enters the mix. This is when timing matters most. Rushing in now risks overpaying by several thousand, but waiting 30 to 45 days lets incoming freight force prices down. The next phase arrives faster than most expect to settle. Those short-term drops are only part of a longer structural shift, the new price floor for the next decade. Korean manufacturing does more than disrupt this year's pricing. It resets expectations for the next decade. A long-term market forecast from an industry analysis group projected sustained cost advantages for Korean builders, driven by automation, integrated supply chains, and lower per-unit labor expenses. When production stays efficient year after year, retail prices naturally settle at lower levels. That becomes the new anchor point for value comparisons. Once a new price floor forms, every new model from domestic manufacturers must respond. Some reduce features to maintain competitive figures. Others adjust production volumes and redesign future units to rely on cheaper components. Factory orders also shift, with plants planning fewer high-priced models and more mid-range builds, intended to defend shrinking market share. This transformation changes what the next generation of rigs looks like and how they are priced. Analysts warn that once lower-priced imports secure market share, higher-cost rivals rarely recover. And this shift reshapes long-term pricing, making your next choice the difference between saving or losing it. With the groundwork clear, the final step is knowing how to navigate the changes, your next move. A market shift of this size calls for a clear plan, and the first step is slowing down. Dealers often pressure shoppers to lock in a figure before incentives adjust. But the ongoing correction suggests patience pays more than urgency. The safest approach starts with verifying real out-the-door pricing rather than relying on posted stickers. Hidden fees and unnecessary add-ons inflate totals quickly, so asking for itemized numbers prevents surprises. Another protective step is comparing listings across multiple regions. When a price gap of several thousand appears between states, it usually signals inventory stress rather than genuine scarcity. Watching those discrepancies helps identify where the best leverage sits. It also helps to track production updates directly from manufacturers, especially when they announce revised model runs. Those changes often precede new incentives. With resale values sliding, pushing harder on price becomes crucial. Dealers usually have more room than they admit, especially with aging stock. Move only when numbers and timing align properly. And this is only the beginning. The next few months are going to expose just how unprepared the industry really is, and how much money buyers can save if they time it right. If you want to stay ahead of every price drop, every leak, and every market shift, make sure you hit drop a comment with your thoughts on this Korean shakeup, and subscribe so you don't get left behind.